Chloe, a chronically lazy modern woman whose only skills are binge-watching TV and ordering takeout, accidentally falls through an interdimensional portal while answering the door for her food delivery. She lands smack in the middle of a cutthroat, ancient martial arts world. Armed with zero combat skills, fuzzy pink slippers, and a pocket full of snacks, she must survive the deadly heavenly cloud sect. Along the way, she manages to hilariously infuriate and accidentally seduce Lord Shen, the sect's stoic, dangerously handsome, and entirely humorless leader. They say love is unpredictable, and today's story proves it. Welcome to Romance Crave Stories, where every episode is full of passion, secrets, and emotional twists. Let's begin. Chloe Evans had exactly 3 skills in life. An uncanny ability to perfectly time the microwave so it wouldn't beep at 2 in the morning, the capacity to binge-watch 8 consecutive seasons of a television show in a single weekend, and a supernatural talent for tripping over completely flat surfaces. None of these skills, you might notice, involved wielding a broadsword, cultivating inner chi, or surviving in a ruthless, ancient martial arts world. But the universe, as it turns out, has a terrible and deeply ironic sense of humor. It was a regular Tuesday evening. Chloe was wearing her finest pair of comfortable sweatpants, the ones with the questionable stain on the left knee that might be soy sauce, but could reasonably also be chocolate. She had ordered extra spicy garlic noodles from a brand new restaurant down the street. When the doorbell finally rang, she scrambled off her incredibly comfortable couch with the pure, unadulterated enthusiasm of a golden retriever, flinging open her front door to greet her food. Instead of encountering Dave, her usual delivery driver holding a plastic bag full of MSG-laden goodness, Chloe stepped straight out of her apartment and into a swirling vortex of glowing, crackling blue mist. She didn't even have the time to scream. One moment she was reaching forward for a warm carton of noodles, and the very next, she was tumbling violently through a cosmic washing machine, entirely devoid of spicy garlic flavor. When she finally landed, it was not on her moderately clean welcome mat. She landed face first in a bush of suspiciously purple bamboo. Coughing loudly and spitting out bitter leaves, Chloe scrambled to her feet, frantically wiping dirt off her stained sweatpants. "Dave," she called out, her voice echoing across a sprawling, magnificent courtyard paved entirely with shimmering white jade. "This isn't my apartment building. And if you ate my noodles, I'm absolutely adjusting your tip." There was no Dave. Instead, there were about 50 people standing in a perfect, intimidating circle around her. They were all dressed in flowing, ethereal robes that looked like they belonged in a high-budget historical drama. They held gleaming, razor-sharp swords, their expressions a collective mix of sheer horror and absolute bewilderment. At the front of the pack stood a man who was frankly illegally handsome. He had sharp aristocratic features, eyes like polished obsidian, and long, dark hair tied back with an elegant silver ribbon. He wore heavy robes of midnight blue, and he was currently pointing a terrifyingly sharp, faintly glowing sword directly at the bridge of her nose. "Demon," the dangerously handsome man barked, his voice smooth but laced with lethal intent. "By what dark art have you breached the sacred wards of the heavenly cloud sect?" Chloe blinked. She looked down at her fuzzy pink slippers, then back up at the glowing sword, and finally at the impossibly attractive man threatening her life. She slowly raised both hands in the universal gesture of surrender. "Look, man," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know what kind of intense Renaissance fair this is, but I'm just here for the garlic noodles. If you guys are out of carbs, I'll just go." The man's eyes narrowed dangerously. The heavy sword hummed with magic. Chloe gulped. She was definitely not in Kansas anymore. Chapter 1. I have a very strict policy when it comes to sharp objects. I avoid them. I don't chop my own vegetables if I can buy them pre-diced. I use safety scissors to open my mail. And I certainly don't make a habit of standing at the business end of glowing, humming, magical broadswords. "I ask you one last time, demon," the incredibly gorgeous man demanded, his voice a rich baritone that absolutely did not match the fact that he was threatening to skewer me. "Speak your true purpose, or I shall let the heavenly frost blade sever your corrupted soul." My purpose was carb loading. I squeaked, my hands still raised in the air. "Look, if I'm trespassing at a cosplay convention, I am so sorry. Just point me toward the nearest subway station, and I'll be out of your..." My words were cut short as the man, whose cheekbones could probably slice open an envelope on their own, suddenly darted forward. He moved so fast he was practically a blur, the tip of his sword lowering abruptly to point directly at my feet. "Stand back," he barked to the circle of men behind him. "Do you not see? She masks her terrifying aura, but her spiritual artifacts give her away." I blinked, looking down at my feet. "My what?" "Behold," he commanded, his dark eyes narrowing with intense, deadly seriousness. "The demonic beasts that swallow her feet whole. They radiate no energy, which means their dark power is unfathomable. What cursed creatures are these?" He was pointing at my slippers. My fuzzy bright pink, memory foam slippers. They had little embroidered pig snouts on the toes. I bought them on clearance at Target for $9. "They're pigs," I offered weakly. "They keep my toes warm. Because I have poor circulation." A gasp rippled through the assembled crowd. "She has subdued the legendary blood swine and bound them to her extremities," one of the men in the back whispered in absolute horror. "Lock her in the abyssal depths," the impossibly handsome leader ordered, sheathing his sword with a dramatic shing that frankly belonged in an anime. "Double the warding seals. If she attempts to unleash the blood swine, or if she summons the dark magic hidden within the foul markings on her garments." He gestured in disgust at the soy sauce stain on my sweatpants. "Execute her immediately." Before I could even process the fact that my target slippers had just been classified as weapons of mass destruction, 2 burly guards seized me by the arms. They didn't drag me so much as aggressively escort me through a maze of incredibly ornate, moonlight-drenched corridors, finally shoving me down a very long, very steep flight of stone stairs. The abyssal depths turned out to be a dungeon. To their credit, it was a very clean dungeon. There were glowing runes on the iron bars, the air was pleasantly cool, and sitting right in the center of the cell was a massive, perfectly flat slab of polished black stone. The guards slammed the barred door shut, slapping a glowing yellow piece of paper onto the lock. "Do not attempt to channel your dark chi, demon," one of them yelled, his voice cracking slightly. "We are watching you." "Great. Thanks," I muttered. I stood in the center of the cell and took stock of my situation. I had no phone. I had no spicy garlic noodles. I had just been kidnapped by a bunch of incredibly attractive, heavily armed LARPers who thought my footwear was demonic. I should have been having a panic attack. I really truly should have. But honestly, the adrenaline was wearing off, and the cool, subterranean air of the dungeon was giving off premium white noise machine vibes. I looked at the giant stone slab. It was completely flat. Well, I thought, shuffling over to it in my terrifying blood swine slippers. It's been a long day. I climbed onto the stone slab, folded my arms under my head to make a makeshift pillow, and closed my eyes. It was a little firm, sure, but it was great for lumbar support. Within 3 minutes, the exhaustion of interdimensional travel hit me like a freight train. Outside the cell, the 2 elite guards of the Heavenly Cloud Sect stood at high alert, their hands gripping their weapons, sweat beading on their foreheads as they waited for the terrifying demon spy to unleash her apocalyptic power. Instead, 10 minutes later, the only sound echoing through the abyssal depths was the rhythmic, slightly congested sound of my snoring. "What dark ritual is this?" the first guard whispered frantically, peering through the bars at my drooling form. "I do not know," the other replied, trembling. "But we must inform Lord Shin immediately. Her meditation technique is unlike anything the world has ever seen." Chapter 2. I was having a wonderful dream about a swimming pool filled entirely with melted garlic butter, when a sound like a thunderclap jolted me awake. I bolted upright, gasping, only to realize I was still sitting in a medieval holding cell. The heavy iron door had been thrown wide open. Standing in the threshold, illuminated by the flickering torchlight, was the incredibly gorgeous, incredibly angry man from the courtyard. He had changed his clothes. He was now wearing flowing robes of pristine white and silver, making him look like an angry, high-fashion angel. 2 guards flanked him, looking at me like I was about to sprout tentacles and eat their faces. "The meditation of the dormant stone," the man said, his voice echoing in the damp space. He stepped into the cell, his hands clasped behind his back. "A high-level defensive trance. You did not even flinch when my guard struck the iron bars to test your awareness." I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes and scratched my cheek. "Yeah, I'm a heavy sleeper. Once slept through a fire alarm in my dorm. It's a gift." His sharp jaw tightened. "Do not speak to me in riddles, demon. I am Lord Shin, Patriarch of the Heavenly Cloud Sect, and my patience is not infinite." He stepped closer, towering over me. Up close, he smelled astonishingly good. Like sandalwood, rain, and absolute authority. Tell me your origins. Which dark sect sent you? And what is the name of your combat style? I sighed, pulling my knees to my chest. Look, Lord Shun. I don't belong to a sect. I belong to a moderately priced gym that I haven't been to since last January. And if you really want to know my combat style, I guess it's called couch potato. Shun's obsidian eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. He repeated the word slowly, as if tasting poison. Couch potato. It's very advanced, I added, because honestly, I was getting tired of explaining myself. It requires years of dedication to prolonged inactivity. My masters are Netflix and Hulu. Netflix? Hulu, Shin murmured, glancing back at his guards, who both shook their heads in terrified ignorance. Shin turned his piercing gaze back to me. I have studied the ancient texts. I know of the iron palm, the flowing water sword, and the shadow step. But this, couch potato, I have never heard of it. It must be an ancient, forbidden art. Before I could correct him, a sound ripped through the silence of the dungeon. It was a low, guttural, vibrating rumble that seemed to echo off the stone walls. It sounded like a sleeping dragon suddenly waking up cranky. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. Lord Shun's eyes widened in alarm. In a flash of silver, his glowing broadsword was drawn. The tip pointed directly at my chest. The two guards behind him drew their weapons, pressing their backs against the dungeon walls. Stand down, Shin commanded, his voice ringing with power. Do not summon it, demon. I warn you, if you unleash the beast within you, I will strike you down where you sit. I froze, staring at the tip of the blade hovering inches from my collarbone. Then I slowly looked down at my own stomach. Did you just draw a sword on my digestive system? I asked, completely deadpan. Do not play the fool. Shin snapped, though I noticed the tip of his sword was trembling slightly. I can hear the foul creature roaring from the depths of your spiritual core. Call it off. The rumble happened again, louder this time. Gurgle. I slumped my shoulders, feeling an overwhelming wave of exhaustion that had nothing to do with interdimensional travel. Lord Shin, that is not a foul creature. That is the sound of a 20-something woman who was promised extra spicy garlic noodles and got kidnapped before she could eat them. Shin stared at me. The guard stared at me. I'm hungry, I clarified, gesturing to my midsection. Like really hungry. My stomach is growling. Shin didn't lower the sword. He looked at my stomach, then back up to my face, his expression a complicated mix of suspicion, confusion, and deep offense. You require sustenance? Desperately, I said, sliding off the stone slab. My fuzzy pink pig slippers patted against the cold floor. So, unless your interrogation involves snacks, we're going to have a problem. Do you guys have a cafeteria? A vending machine? Or at the very least, what's the Wi-Fi password around here, so I can try to order an Uber? Shin slowly lowered his sword, looking at me as if I were a puzzle missing half its pieces. I will not tolerate your insolence, he said softly. And I won't tolerate low blood sugar, I shot back. Sandwich. Now. Or the couch potato gets angry. Chapter 3. They did not have sandwiches. What they did have was a bowl of plain, unseasoned rice porridge, and a cup of pale green tea that tasted like hot leaf water. I ate it anyway, sitting cross-legged on my dungeon slab while Lord Shin and his guards watched me with the intense scrutiny of wildlife documentarians observing a particularly confusing species of lemur. Apparently, eating without violently regurgitating dark energy was enough to convince Lord Shin that I wasn't an immediate threat to the fabric of reality. Or maybe he just felt bad for me. Either way, he ordered the guards to release me into his personal custody. You will remain by my side at all times, Shin instructed, his robes billowing dramatically as he led me out of the dungeon and into the blinding sunlight of the heavenly cloud sect. Until I deduce the true nature of your couch potato arts, you are my prisoner. Worst kidnapping ever, I grumbled, squinting against the glare. But I had to admit, my prison was stunning. We walked through a sprawling garden that looked like a CGI background from a high-budget fantasy epic. There were arched wooden bridges over koi ponds, waterfalls trickling down mossy stones, and trees with petals that seemed to fall in perpetual slow motion. Shin walked a few paces ahead of me, a picture of martial grace. He moved completely silently, his posture impeccably straight. Meanwhile, I was shuffling along in my pink pig slippers, my sweatpants swishing noisily, desperately wishing I had brought my sunglasses to this alternate dimension. Tell me, Chloe, Shen said, not looking back. He pronounced my name with a sharp, exotic cadence. Chloe, if your sect is truly devoted to this Netflix, what is their ultimate goal? World domination? Immortality? Mostly just avoiding social interaction and paying an extra $3 a month, so we don't have to watch ads, I replied. Shen paused, glancing over his shoulder. Ads. Mind control spells, I lied smoothly. Very dark magic. He nodded gravely, clearly impressed. You possess strong mental fortitude to resist them. I was about to explain the concept of a premium subscription when the serene quiet of the garden was abruptly shattered. The water in the koi pond exploded. 3 figures dressed entirely in black erupted from the water, their swords gleaming with deadly intent. They didn't even pause to shake off the water. They launched themselves directly at Lord Shen, moving so fast they were practically blurs. Assassins from the venomous Toad Sect. Shen roared. In a fraction of a second, his silver broadsword was in his hand, blocking a strike from the first assassin with a resounding clang that sent sparks flying. He kicked the second assassin in the chest, sending him crashing into a weeping willow. But the third assassin was smart. He saw me, the weird, shuffling woman in the pink slippers, and decided I was the weak link. He pivoted, raising a jagged, poison-coated dagger, and charged straight at me. My fight-or-flight response kicked in. Unfortunately, flight wasn't an option because I was wearing loose slippers, and fight wasn't an option because my upper body strength was a joke. So, I went with option 3. Frantic, uncoordinated panic. I jammed my hands into the deep pockets of my sweatpants, praying for some kind of miracle. Pepper spray? Keys. My fingers brushed against a small, crinkly plastic wrapper. It was an oat and honey granola bar. I had put it in this pocket roughly 3 months ago during a brief, deeply misguided attempt to take up hiking, and I had completely forgotten about it. By now, it was less food and more geological artifact. The assassin leaped into the air, screaming a battle cry, his dagger aimed at my neck. I didn't think. I just whipped my hand out of my pocket, reared back, and hurled the granola bar with all the strength my sedentary lifestyle could muster. By some absolute fluke of physics, my aim was dead on. The stale, brick-hard granola bar struck the assassin squarely in his right eye with a sickening thwack. Ack! My eye! The assassin shrieked, dropping his dagger and clutching his face in agony. Lord Shen, having just dispatched the other 2 attackers, spun around to save me, only to freeze in his tracks. He stared at the groaning assassin on the ground, then looked at me. I was still standing in a throwing stance, panting heavily. Shen walked over to the groaning man and picked up the weapon that had felled him. He held the crumpled green wrapper delicately between his fingers, examining the rock-hard rectangle of oats and honey inside. A hidden weapon, Shen breathed, his obsidian eyes wide with awe. Disguised in a crinkling sheath of unknown material. And the projectile itself. It is as hard as diamond, yet smells faintly of sweet nectar. He looked at me, a profound, unsettling respect dawning on his devastatingly handsome face. What manner of terrifying artifact is this? He asked softly. I slowly lowered my throwing arm, trying to look as casually deadly as possible. It's called Nature's Valley, I said, my voice shaking only slightly. And let that be a lesson. It crumbles for no man. Chapter 4. Word travels fast in the heavenly cloud sect. By breakfast the next morning, I was no longer Chloe the demonic spy. I had been officially upgraded to Grandmaster Chloe of the Petrified Grain. My upgrade came with perks. I was moved out of the abyssal depths and into a sprawling guest pavilion that smelled heavily of jasmine and expensive wood polish. My new bed was a mountain of silk pillows, and my breakfast was not unseasoned rice gruel, but an entire banquet of steamed buns, exotic fruits and roast duck. I was currently halfway through a very fluffy red bean bun when a young disciple in pale blue robes appeared at my open doorway. He immediately dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead against the bamboo floorboards. "Venerable Grandmaster," he shouted, his voice cracking with puberty and extreme reverence. "I humbly seek your guidance." I froze, a piece of bun still hanging out of my mouth. I chewed slowly, swallowed, and wiped my hands on my sweatpants. Sure. Kumein. Do you want a bun? The kid scrambled into the room on his knees, refusing to stand in my terrifying presence. I dare not accept sustenance from the master. I only seek wisdom. I have practiced the sweeping gale sword form for 3 days and 3 nights without rest, yet my blade feels sluggish. How do I unlock my inner chi? I stared at the bags under the poor kid's eyes. He looked like he had been living on espresso and pure anxiety. 3 days without rest? I asked, horrified. Yes, Grandmaster, he said proudly. I have forsaken sleep to achieve martial perfection. I sighed, channeling my best, most authoritative fake guru voice. I gestured for him to sit up. Listen to me, young grasshopper. Your blade is sluggish because your brain is currently a smoothie. To master the sword, you must first master the art of the 8-hour sleep cycle. The disciple blinked, thoroughly confused. The 8-hour sleep cycle? It is a sacred, forbidden technique. I lied effortlessly, leaning forward and lowering my voice to a dramatic whisper. You must recline on a soft surface, close your eyes, and do absolutely nothing for a continuous 8 hours. Only then will the sweeping gale return to you. Also, you need to drink a glass of water. Your skin looks terrible. Fascinating. A smooth, deep voice murmured from the doorway. I jumped. Lord Shen was leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed over his broad chest. He wore robes of charcoal gray today, the silver embroidery catching the morning light. He looked effortlessly lethal and entirely too handsome for this early in the day. The young disciple scrambled to his feet, bowing frantically to his sect leader before fleeing the pavilion to go take a nap. Shen uncrossed his arms and stepped into my room. He moved with that same silent, predatory grace, his dark eyes fixed on me. You dispense strange wisdom, Grandmaster Chloe. You encourage my finest disciples to surrender to sloth. I encourage them not to stroke out before their 20th birthday. I shot back, picking up another steamed bun. Seriously, you guys need labor laws. Or at least a union. Shen walked over and took a seat at the low wooden table opposite me. He poured himself a cup of tea, his movements precise and elegant. The elders are in an uproar, he said casually, taking a sip. Half of them believe you are a reincarnated deity. The other half believe you are a witch who cast a bewitchment upon the venomous toad assassin. I just threw a stale granola bar at him, Shen. It's not that deep. A tiny, almost imperceptible twitch pulled at the corner of Shen's mouth. It was the closest thing to a smile I had seen from him yet, and it did completely unfair things to my heart rate. You do not carry yourself like a warrior, Shen mused, his intense gaze dropping to my fuzzy pink pig slippers, which were currently dangling off the edge of my silk cushion. You possess no inner energy. You complain about the humidity. And yet, you defeated a trained killer with a single strike. He set his teacup down and leaned closer across the table. The scent of sandalwood and rain washed over me, making my brain pleasantly fuzzy. Who are you, Chloe? He asked softly, the sharp edge of his authority softening into genuine, captivating curiosity. And what manner of chaotic magic do you wield? I told you, I said, trying very hard not to stare at his cheekbones. I wield the magic of staying hydrated and minding my own business. You should try it sometime. This time, a soft, rich chuckle actually escaped his lips. The sound vibrated through my chest, and I realized with a sudden, terrifying clarity that I was in serious, serious trouble. The scary martial arts master was laughing at my jokes. I was doomed. Chapter 5. My brief, terrifying moment of thinking Lord Shen was cute evaporated entirely exactly 1 hour later, when he dragged me out to the main training courtyard. The courtyard was the size of a football field, paved with that same glaringly bright white jade, and filled with hundreds of disciples practicing their sword forms in perfect, terrifying unison. The sheer amount of physical exertion happening in one place was enough to make my hamstrings cramp in sympathy. The elders demand proof of your martial prowess, Shen announced, his voice carrying effortlessly over the collective grunts of his students. He had his hands clasped behind his back again, looking every inch the imperious martial god. While the incident with the Nature's Valley was impressive, a true master must possess foundational physical conditioning. I must evaluate your baseline. My baseline is sitting horizontally and asking, are you still watching? When Netflix judges me, I informed him. Shen ignored this. He gestured to a cleared space in the center of the courtyard. Show me your physical form. A simple demonstration of strength. Perhaps the tiger leaping over the mountain? I stared at him blankly. The coiled dragon ascends, he offered. Nothing. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his perfectly sculpted nose. Just show me how you lift your own body weight off the ground. Oh. A push-up. I said, snapping my fingers. Yeah, I know what that is. I had to do them in high school gym class. I got a solid C-. Shin stepped back, his dark eyes fixed on me with intense, unwavering focus. Show me this. Push-up. I took a deep breath. All right, Chloe, I thought to myself. You can do this. You're an independent modern woman. You carried a 12-pack of sparkling water up 3 flights of stairs last month. How hard can one push-up be? I kicked off my pig slippers, figuring barefoot was more tactical, and lowered myself onto the pristine jade floor. I got into the plank position. Immediately, my arms began to shake like over-caffeinated chihuahuas. Your core is entirely unaligned, Shin noted, his brow furrowing as he circled me. And your spiritual center is completely slack. My spiritual center is trying its best. I gritted out through clenched teeth. Descend, Shin commanded. I took another breath, braced my pathetic excuse for triceps, and bent my elbows. I went down an inch. 2 inches. 3 inches. Suddenly, gravity, which had previously been a neutral party in my life, decided to wage absolute war against my upper body. My arms, realizing they were being asked to do actual labor, immediately went on strike. With a pathetic, wheezing squeak, my elbows buckled entirely. I didn't fall gracefully. I dropped like a sack of uncoordinated potatoes, face planting directly onto the hard, cold jade with a very undignified smack. Silence fell over our corner of the courtyard. A few disciples nearby actually stopped their sword drills to stare at the legendary Grandmaster Chloe, who was currently lying spread eagle on the ground, completely motionless. Shin's polished boots stepped into my field of vision. He stood over me for a long time. Are you employing a new variation of the dormant stone meditation? He asked slowly. I turned my head to the side, pressing my cheek against the cool stone. I didn't want to get up. I wanted to live here now on the floor. The floor asked nothing of me. The earth needed a hug. I mumbled into the dirt. Shin didn't say anything. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for a lecture about honor, discipline, and the complete lack of chi in my noodle-fueled body. Instead, I heard a strange, stifled sound. I cracked one eye open. Lord Shin had turned his head away, raising a fist to his mouth. His broad shoulders were actually shaking. He was trying so desperately hard to maintain his stoic, fearsome reputation, but he was failing spectacularly. The terrifying, legendary patriarch of the heavenly cloud sect was holding back a massive, totally genuine smile. Very well, Shin managed to say, his voice thick with suppressed amusement. He finally looked back down at me, his obsidian eyes dancing with a light I hadn't seen before. He reached down, offering me his large, calloused hand. I believe the earth has been sufficiently comforted. Come, Grand Master. Let us conclude today's rigorous training. I took his hand, letting him pull me effortlessly to my feet, and decided that maybe, just maybe, this weird martial world wasn't so bad after all. Chapter 6. If there is one thing I have learned about the martial arts world, it's that absolutely no one just sends an email. Everything has to be a diplomatic summit, which involves entirely too much posture, veiled threats, and drinking hot liquids in the middle of the afternoon. Lord Shin had insisted I attend a formal meeting with the leader of the rival Iron Centipede sect. You are my guest and the rumors of your power have spread, Shin had explained, tossing a stunning, ridiculously expensive-looking robe of woven silver silk at me. Wear this over your sweatpants. And try to look menacing. I can do aloof and vaguely irritated. I negotiated, slipping the robe over my shoulders. Take it or leave it. That was how I found myself sitting on a velvet cushion in the grand reception hall, flanking Lord Shin as we faced Master Zhao, a man who looked exactly like the villain in a low-budget kung fu movie. He had a wispy mustache, a slimy smile, and a vibe that screamed, I definitely kick puppies in my spare time. The meeting had been dragging on for an hour. Zhao had been speaking in circles about territory lines and spirit crystal mining rights. I was completely zoning out, actively daydreaming about a greasy slice of pepperoni pizza, when Zhao suddenly clapped his hands. But enough business, Zhao declared, his eyes glinting maliciously. I have brought a peace offering. A rare brew, harvested from the peaks of the Whispering Mountains. Let us drink to our continued cooperation. One of Zhao's shivering disciples stepped forward, pouring a cup of dark, slightly glowing green tea for Shin. and then one for me. Shun's posture instantly stiffened. His hand hovered over his cup, his sharp eyes darting from the glowing liquid to Zhao's overly eager face. He leaned slightly toward me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. Do not drink, Chloe. The iron centipedes are masters of venom. I sense a disturbance in the brew. Unfortunately for Shun, I had not had anything to drink since my morning water, and the pavilion was weirdly stuffy. Plus, the tea smelled faintly of citrus. Before Shun could stop me, I picked up the delicate porcelain cup and downed the entire thing in 3 massive gulps. Zhao gasped, leaning forward, an evil, triumphant smirk spreading across his face. The Grandmaster drinks. Tell me, Chloe of the petrified grain, how does the 1,000-step blood-rot poison taste? Shun leapt to his feet, his chair crashing backward. His sword was drawn in a flash of blinding silver, pointed directly at Zhao's throat. You dare. If she perishes, I will eradicate your entire sect from the face of the earth. It is too late. Zhao cackled, standing up and pointing a dramatic finger at me. The blood rot works instantly. In mere seconds, her veins will turn black, her spiritual core will shatter, and she will weep tears of blood. Shin spun around to look at me, his face pale, his dark eyes wide with genuine, unmasked terror. Chloe, hold on. I will transfer my chi to you to slow the venom. I blinked at him, then at Zhao. I smacked my lips together, evaluating the aftertaste. Then I let out a loud, unapologetic, highly unladylike burp. Excuse me, I said, tapping my chest. Carbonation gets me every time. Also, I don't know about blood rot, but this tastes exactly like the green apple kiwi energy drinks I used to buy at the gas station at 3 a.m. during college finals week. Silence descended upon the reception hall. Heavy, absolute silence. Zhao's evil smirk melted off his face. His jaw dropped open, his eyes bulging as he stared at my perfectly normal, non-blackened veins. Impossible, he whispered, stepping back. That was enough concentrated venom to kill a fully grown mountain rhino. Why are you not bleeding from your eyes? Buddy, I said gently, leaning forward on my elbows. My immune system is built on a foundation of microwave burritos, questionable street tacos, and iced coffees that are 90% artificial syrup. You think some leafy green tea is going to take me out? Please. My digestive tract is a toxic wasteland. This is basically a cleanse. Zhao let out a high-pitched, terrified shriek. Monstrous, he screamed, backing away so fast he tripped over his own robes. She consumes the blood rot for pleasure. Her internal constitution is that of an immortal demon god. Retreat. Retreat. He scrambled to his feet and sprinted out of the pavilion, his disciples fleeing in sheer panic right behind him. Within seconds, the hall was empty, save for me and Shun. Shun slowly lowered his sword. He stared at the empty doorway, then slowly turned his head to look at me. The terror in his eyes had entirely vanished, replaced by an expression of profound, awestruck fascination. His gaze tracked down my throat, lingering on my completely intact collarbones, before meeting my eyes. You drank a lethal neurotoxin, he said, his voice raspy. And you burped. I said excuse me. I defended, feeling a sudden flush creep up my neck. Why was he looking at me like that? It was the look a man gives a woman right before he kisses her. Or right before he asks her to marry him. And it was entirely too intense for a Tuesday. You are absolutely terrifying, Shin whispered, taking a slow step toward me, his eyes dark and smoldering. I'm just well preserved, I muttered, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. Shin sheathed his sword, not breaking eye contact. For the first time, I realized that surviving a poison assassination attempt might have just been the most wildly attractive thing I could have possibly done in this dimension. Chapter 7. For a guy who consistently smelled like expensive sandalwood and fresh rain, Lord Shin spent an alarming amount of time covered in other people's blood. It was late afternoon when he returned from what he casually referred to as a minor border dispute with the remnants of the Iron Centipede sect. He strode into the courtyard looking like an avenging war god, his charcoal robes singed and his jaw set in a grim line. But my eyes immediately zeroed in on his left arm. His sleeve was torn, and a rather nasty-looking gash was trailing blood down his bulging bicep. The courtyard erupted into absolute chaos. Disciples were running in circles, screaming for the medical elders and weeping loudly. Fetch the 1,000-year snow lotus pills. One of the elders wailed, wringing his hands. The The patriarch's life force is leaking. Do not be absurd, Shin barked, though his face was a fraction paler than usual. It is a mere flesh wound. Save the lotus pills for a fatal injury. I shall simply meditate the pain away. You absolutely will not, I said, pushing my way through the crowd of hysterical swordsmen. Sit down on that stone bench before you bleed all over the white jade. Do you know how hard it is to get blood out of porous rock? Shin blinked, taken aback by my authoritative tone, but he obediently sat down. Chloe, it is fine. A warrior ignores pain. A warrior also gets tetanus, I shot back. I scurried back to my pavilion and grabbed the small faux leather crossbody purse I had been wearing when I was sucked through the interdimensional delivery portal. I dug past 3 crumpled receipts, a melted tube of lip balm, and a half-empty pack of gum, finally pulling out my holy grails, a travel-sized tube of neosporin and a brightly colored cardboard box. I marched back out to the courtyard, where Shen was sitting stoically while his disciples watched him weepingly from a respectful distance. All right, big guy, let me see it, I said, crouching beside the stone bench. Up close, the cut wasn't too deep, but it definitely needed cleaning. I used some water from my canteen and a clean cloth to wipe away the blood. Shin didn't so much as flinch. He just watched me, his dark obsidian eyes tracking my every movement with an intensity that made my fingers feel suddenly clumsy. This is an ancient medicinal salve, I explained, uncapping the neosporin. It prevents demonic infection. I am ready, Shin said solemnly, bracing his massive muscles. I will not cry out, no matter how terribly the magical fire burns. It's going to feel like cold jelly, I said. I dabbed the ointment onto his bicep. Shin squeezed his eyes shut, his jaw clenched tight, and then slowly opened one eye when nothing happened. It does not burn, he whispered, bewildered. Modern medicine, baby, I muttered. Then I popped open the cardboard box and pulled out a bandage. I peeled off the backing and carefully pressed it over the center of the wound, smoothing down the adhesive edges. Out of habit. The exact same habit my mom had used when I scraped my knee falling off my bike in the 3rd grade. I leaned forward and gently blew a breath of cool air over the bandage to help the stinging. Shen's entire body went rigid. I looked up. The fearsome, stoic patriarch of the Heavenly Cloud Sect, a man who could decapitate an assassin without blinking, was currently blushing so hard his ears were bright red. He was staring at the bandage on his arm, completely mesmerized. What manner of protective ward is this? He asked, his voice suddenly very hoarse. He was looking directly at the bright pink band-aid. Plastered squarely over his bulging, battle-scarred bicep was a cheerful illustration of Hello Kitty, winking and holding a tiny red apple. It's a feline spirit guardian, I said softly, suddenly hyper-aware of how close our faces were. She wards off bacteria. She has no mouth, Shin observed, his chest rising and falling a little faster than before. Her power must be beyond comprehension. Absolutely terrifying, I agreed. Shin slowly looked up from the cartoon cat, his dark eyes locking onto mine. The blush was still high on his cheekbones, and the air between us suddenly felt thick and heavy. He didn't pull his arm away. Instead, he leaned in a fraction of an inch closer, his gaze dropping momentarily to my lips. Your healing arts are profoundly effective, Chloe, he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. My heart is beating erratically in my chest. I fear I may need further observation. I swallowed hard, my own pulse skyrocketing. Yeah, I should probably take your blood pressure, just to be safe. He didn't know what blood pressure was, and I didn't have a cuff to take it anyway, but as we sat there staring at each other in the courtyard, I was pretty sure neither of us cared. Chapter 8. I was just starting to get used to the rhythm of life in the Heavenly Cloud Sect. My daily routine consisted of waking up at noon, accepting terrifyingly reverent bows from heavily armed teenagers, and avoiding any sudden movements that might be misconstrued as martial intent. It was a peaceful Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting by the koi pond, tossing breadcrumbs to the fish, when a woman literally dropped out of the sky. She landed gracefully on the white jade gravel, her pristine lavender robes fluttering perfectly around her. She was, without exaggeration, the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She had skin like porcelain, lips like crushed rose petals, and a long, sweeping ponytail that looked like it belonged in a high-end shampoo commercial. She also had 2 curved, incredibly lethal-looking scimitars in her hands. Chloe of the petrified grain, she announced, her voice like wind chimes dipped in liquid nitrogen. I am Lady Lin, first martial sister of the Heavenly Cloud Sect. And I challenge you. I paused, a piece of bread halfway to the pond. Challenge me to what? A staring contest? Because I wear contacts, my eyes dry out really fast. Lady Lin's beautiful face twisted into a snarl. She pointed one of her gleaming scimitars directly at my chest. Do not mock me, demon. I have loved Lord Shen since we were mere disciples. I have fought by his side, bled for this sect, and cultivated my chi for a decade to prove myself worthy of standing beside him as his equal. That's a lot of dedication, I admitted politely. Good for you. And then you arrive, she hissed, taking a step closer. A strange woman who dresses in the garments of a beggar, who possesses no inner strength, who wields terrifying felines without mouths to bewitch his mind. I see the way he looks at you. I see the way he brings you sweet buns in the morning. I blinked. Wait, you're mad about the buns? I challenge you to a duel. Lady Lin screamed, her patience completely evaporating. A battle of martial prowess and spiritual fortitude. The winner shall claim Lord Shun's heart. The loser leaves the sect forever. Draw your weapon, Grandmaster. She settled into a flawless, terrifying combat stance, her scimitars catching the sunlight. The few disciples who were wandering through the gardens instantly stopped, gasping in horror and backing away to give us a wide berth. I looked at Lady Lin. I looked at her massive, sharp swords. Then I looked down at my hands, which were currently covered in breadcrumbs. I forfeit, I said. Lady Lin froze, completely derailing her dramatic momentum. What? I forfeit, I repeated, dusting my hands off on my sweatpants. You win. Congratulations. Take him. Just a heads up, he's super intense about his posture, and he doesn't understand what a weekend is, but he's got great cheekbones. Have a nice life together. I turned around to head back to my pavilion, deeply craving a nap. I hadn't even taken 2 steps before a voice thundered through the garden, practically shaking the leaves off the willow trees. You surrender? I jumped. Lord Shen stepped out from behind a carved stone pillar, his charcoal robes billowing, his face a mask of absolute, unadulterated outrage. He wasn't looking at Lady Lin. He was staring directly at me, looking more offended than the time I asked him if his magical broadsword could be used to toast marshmallows. Patriarch. Lady Lin gasped, immediately dropping to one knee. I was only defending your honor. Shen completely ignored her. He marched straight past the kneeling martial sister, his heavy boots echoing on the jade, until he was standing right in front of me. He looked furious. Actually, he looked hurt. You did not even draw your hidden grain, he demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous, vibrating baritone. You did not summon your demonic pink swine. You simply yielded. Shun, she has 2 giant swords, I pointed out reasonably. I have half a dinner roll. That is irrelevant. Shin snapped, throwing his hands up in a very unstoic gesture of frustration. You are the grandmaster of the couch potato. You defeated the 1,000-step blood rot with a burp. You could have easily bested her, yet you throw me away as if I am a discarded dumpling wrapper. I am not fighting a ninja for a man. I yelled back, my own temper flaring. I'm tired. I just want to sit down. Shen's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might shatter. Without another word, he reached out, clamped his large, warm hand around my wrist, and practically hoisted me off the ground. Hey, where are we going? I squawked as he dragged me away from the koi pond, leaving a completely bewildered Lady Lin kneeling in the gravel behind us. We are going somewhere private, Shen growled, his grip firm but surprisingly gentle as he pulled me down the corridor. Because you and I, Chloe, are going to have a very long conversation about your alarming lack of fighting spirit when it comes to me. Chapter 9. Lord Shen dragged me through a labyrinth of ornate moon gates and whispering bamboo groves, until we reached a secluded, walled garden. In the absolute center stood a massive, ancient cherry blossom tree. Its pink petals were drifting down in a gentle breeze, making the whole place look obnoxiously cinematic. He let go of my wrist, but only so he could step directly into my space. I instinctively retreated, backing up until my shoulder blades hit the rough bark of the tree. Shin immediately slammed one hand against the trunk next to my head, effectively trapping me. Why? He demanded, his chest heaving underneath his charcoal robes. Why did you surrender? Am I so entirely unworthy of your martial spirit? Do you find me lacking? Lacking. I threw my free hand up in the air. Shen, look at yourself. You're a majestic, glowing, magical warrior who smells like expensive rain and cuts down assassins before breakfast. You're practically glowing right now. You are the farthest thing from lacking. Then why? He roared, his frustration finally cracking his perfect, stoic composure. Because I don't fight. I yelled right back, the truth finally boiling over. I don't have a martial spirit. I don't have chi or inner energy, or a hidden technique. I am not a grandmaster. Shen froze, his dark eyes widening in shock. But the dam had broken, and I couldn't stop. I'm exactly what I told you I was on day one. I order takeout. I sleep for 10 hours on weekends. I have terrible posture. I complain when I have to walk up a single flight of stairs. And the only reason that granola bar hit that assassin is because I panicked and got incredibly, stupidly lucky. I don't know how to wield a sword, Shun. I am just a completely unremarkable, hopelessly lazy mess. I squeezed my eyes shut, panting for breath, waiting for the disgust. I waited for the legendary patriarch of the heavenly cloud sect to draw his terrifying sword, or to laugh in my face, or to finally realize he had been wasting his time on a total fraud. But the shouting didn't come. Instead, I felt a warm, callous finger gently brush a stray piece of hair out of my face, tucking it behind my ear. I slowly opened my eyes. Shin hadn't backed away. If anything, he was closer. The anger had completely vanished from his striking features, replaced by a tenderness so intense it made my breath hitch in my throat. A mess, he murmured, testing the word on his tongue like it was a rare, fascinating delicacy. A total disaster, I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. Shin slowly lowered his hand, his thumb lightly tracing the line of my jaw. You survived a trained killer with a stale oat brick. You drank the 1,000-step blood rot, and complained of carbonation. You healed my battle wounds with a mouthless feline ward. You may not wield a sword, Chloe, but you are the farthest thing from unremarkable. He took a half-step forward, completely eliminating the space between us. The scent of sandalwood and rain enveloped me, dizzying and intoxicating. You, Shin whispered, his gaze dropping slowly to my lips, are the most captivating mess in all the realms. And if you will not fight for me, then I shall simply have to spend the rest of my days fighting for you. My brain officially short-circuited. Oh. Shin tilted his head, his large hand sliding to the nape of my neck, his thumb resting gently against my racing pulse. He leaned in, his thick eyelashes fluttering shut, his face angled perfectly, his lips hovering mere millimeters from mine. I closed my eyes, entirely ready to let this impossibly handsome martial god kiss me senseless under a cherry blossom tree. And that was exactly the moment the ground beneath us exploded. Chapter 10. 1 second. I was about to experience the most epic romance novel-worthy kiss of my entire life. The next second, a massive plume of purple smoke erupted from the grass, and a pair of scaly, heavily clawed hands grabbed my ankles. Chloe. Shun's roar was deafening, echoing with a terrifying surge of pure chi as he lunged for me. But he was too late. The ground simply swallowed me whole. I tumbled down a suffocating chute of dark magic and sulfur, screaming the entire way, until I was spat out onto a floor made of jagged, unpolished obsidian. I groaned, pushing myself up onto my hands and knees. My fuzzy pink pig slippers had miraculously stayed on, but my sweatpants were covered in soot. I looked around. The room was a massive cavern lit by eerie, flickering green torches. The walls were adorned with what looked like actual human bones, draped in chains, and heavily accessorized with spikes. It looked exactly like a basement belonging to a high school sophomore going through a very intense goth phase. Tremble, mortal. A voice boomed from the shadows. A figure stepped into the green light. He was 8 feet tall, with skin the color of an eggplant, 2 massive curled horns and glowing red eyes. He wore a cape made of what appeared to be woven bats. I am Malachar, supreme overlord of the Blood Shadow cult, he announced, raising his arms. I have stolen the heavenly cloud sect's greatest weapon. You shall languish in my torment chamber until Lord Shin surrenders his territory to me. I sat back on my heels, dusting off my hands. I looked at Malachar. I looked at the bone sconces. Then I blew a stray piece of soot out of my face. Do you guys not own a dehumidifier? I asked. Malachar paused, his massive arms still raised in the air. What? It is insanely humid in here, I said, pointing to the ceiling, which was currently dripping condensation. My hair is naturally wavy, and in this kind of moisture, it doesn't look sexy and tousled. It just looks like a giant triangle. Also this decor? I gestured to the skulls on the wall. It's very 2006 Hot Topic. A bit derivative, don't you think? You need some tapestries. Maybe a nice throw pillow. The supreme overlord of the Blood Shadow cult lowered his arms, looking deeply confused. You are supposed to be weeping in terror. I was literally half a second away from kissing the hottest guy in this dimension, and you dragged me through a dirt pipe? I snapped, standing up and crossing my arms. I'm not terrified, Malachor. I am incredibly deeply annoyed. And I'm hungry. Hungry, he echoed, his glowing red eyes blinking. We are demons. We feast on the agonizing souls of the innocent. Okay, but do you have, like, a pretzel? I pressed. A cracker? A piece of fruit? My blood sugar is crashing, and if I don't get some simple carbohydrates in the next 10 minutes, I am going to become very difficult to manage. I am a demon overlord. Malachor roared, trying to regain control of the room. I do not fetch snacks for prisoners. 10 minutes later, I was pacing the length of the cavern, my arms still crossed. Honestly, it's just poor hosting, I complained loudly to the 2 demon guards standing by the door, who were actively trying to avoid eye contact with me. You kidnap a guest, you offer them a beverage. It's basic etiquette. Even the weird martial arts guys gave me unseasoned rice. You're telling me an entire evil cult doesn't have a single vending machine? How do you retain your minions? Your benefits package must be a joke. Make her stop, Malachor whispered to his lieutenant, rubbing his temples with 2 massive claws. Her voice, it is like a drill piercing my demonic core. I can't hear you, I called out. And I could stop talking if my mouth was occupied with a snack. Even a handful of stale almonds would do. Or maybe a little cheese. Do demons make cheese? We do not make cheese. Malachor shrieked, his voice cracking with pure hysteria. He dropped to his knees, clutching his horned head. Why is she not afraid? Why won't she stop asking for dairy products? Look, I said softly, walking over and patting the towering demon on his spiked shoulder. You really should have done your research before you abducted me. I'm a nightmare on an empty stomach. Chapter 11. The heavy obsidian doors of the Blood Shadow cult's subterranean lair didn't just open, they completely exploded inward. A shockwave of pure, blinding silver energy obliterated the entrance, sending jagged shards of dark stone raining across the cavern. Through the settling dust and smoke stepped Lord Shun. He was a terrifying vision of absolute, unhinged wrath. His charcoal robes whipped around him in an unnatural, ethereal wind. His obsidian eyes burned with lethal intent, and the heavenly frost blade in his hand glowed so brightly it was almost painful to look at. He had tracked me through the demonic portal, ready to slaughter an entire cult, tear down the mountain with his bare hands, and wade through a river of blood to get me back. Where is she? Shun's roar echoed off the cavern walls, shaking the very earth beneath our feet. Show yourselves, fiends. I will leave no soul intact. He leveled his glowing broadsword, bracing for a horde of terrifying monsters to rush him. Instead, the cavern was dead silent, save for the sound of someone blowing their nose. Shun blinked, his murderous aura stalling out completely as the dust cleared. The 2 heavily armed demon guards by the door were sitting on the floor, weeping openly and hugging each other for comfort. In the center of the room, Malachor, the 8-foot-tall supreme overlord of the Blood Shadow cult, was curled into the fetal position on his knees. The moment Malachor saw Shun, he didn't raise a weapon. He scrambled forward and practically threw himself at Shun's boots, his glowing red eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated desperation. Take her. Malachor sobbed, pointing a trembling, clawed finger toward the back of the room. Please, by the dark gods, I beg of you. Take her away from me. I will sign the border treaties. I will surrender the spirit mines. Just make her stop talking about customer service. Shun stared down at the blubbering demon overlord, utterly bewildered. Slowly, he looked past the giant horns and bat wings to the back of the cavern. I was sitting cross-legged on a pile of decorative skulls, meticulously picking at a chipped fingernail. Oh hey, I called out, waving cheerfully at my rescuer. Did you bring any snacks? I'm starving. I was just explaining to Malachor here that his lack of basic hospitality is terrible for long-term brand loyalty, and he completely lost it. Shun let out a long, shuddering breath. The lethal, blinding glow of his sword faded away, and he sheathed the weapon with a sharp shing. He walked past the sobbing demon overlord without a single glance, marching straight up to my pile of skulls. Before I could say another word, he reached down and scooped me effortlessly into his arms. I squeaked in surprise as I was suddenly pressed against his broad, solid chest. I instinctively looped my arms around his neck. Beneath the heavy fabric of his robes, his heart was hammering a frantic, terrified rhythm, betraying exactly how scared he had actually been. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply, holding me so tightly my ribs ached. I could feel the tension draining out of his massive frame. "You are an absolute menace," Shen muttered into my hair, his voice rough with emotion and profound exasperation. I smiled, resting my cheek against his shoulder, entirely ignoring the crying demons in the background. "Yeah," I whispered back. "But I'm your menace." Chapter 12. The journey back to the Heavenly Cloud Sect was significantly more pleasant than the journey out, mostly because I didn't have to walk. Lord Shen carried me the entire way, his arms acting as a remarkably comfortable, sandalwood-scented palanquin. By the time we stepped back into the pristine, white jade courtyard of his home, the sun was just beginning to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the willow trees. Shen finally set me down, his hands lingering on my waist for a fraction of a second longer than strictly necessary. "I will have the kitchens prepare a feast," he said softly, his dark eyes entirely focused on me. "No rice gruel. Only the finest roasted meats and steamed buns. You require." What was the term? "Simple carbohydrates." I grinned, my heart doing a very unlazy flip in my chest. "You're learning. Throw in some soy sauce, and I might just marry you." Shen's breath hitched. He took a half step forward, his gaze dropping to my lips once again. The air between us instantly crackled with that same heavy, magnetic tension from the cherry blossom garden. "Chloe, bees the zap." The deafening sound of a cosmic electrical short-circuit tore through the courtyard. Shen and I both jumped back as the air in the exact center of the courtyard warped and tore open. A swirling vortex of glowing, crackling blue mist expanded outward, humming with a strange, unnatural vibration. I stared at it, my jaw dropping. It was the exact same portal that had sucked me out of my apartment. Through the swirling blue mist, I could see it. My living room. My incredibly comfortable, slightly lumpy beige couch. The television was still glowing, currently paused on the black and red screen that judged me with the words, "Are you still watching?" And there, sitting on the coffee table, was the white plastic bag from the delivery guy, practically radiating the faint, heavenly scent of MSG and spicy garlic. "The rift," Shen whispered. I looked at him. All the color had drained from his devastatingly handsome face. He was staring at the portal, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle jumped in his cheek. He slowly lowered his hands from my waist, taking a deliberate step backward. "Your realm has returned for you," Shen said, his voice entirely devoid of its usual booming authority. It sounded hollow. Broken. "Shen." I started. He held up a hand, silencing me. He refused to meet my eyes, opting instead to stare fixedly at my fuzzy pink pig slippers. His left hand was gripping the hilt of his broadsword so tightly his knuckles were stark white. "You have made your desires clear from the beginning," he said, swallowing hard. "You miss your realm of the couch potato. You miss your Netflix and your Wi-Fi and a life free from assassination attempts. I am a warrior, Chloe. My life is blood and steel and discipline. I cannot force you to remain in a world that offers you nothing but discomfort." He finally looked at me, and the raw, unmasked heartbreak in his obsidian eyes was enough to knock the wind out of my lungs. "Go to your noodles, Grandmaster," he whispered. "You are free." I looked at the portal. I looked at my apartment. It was safe there. There were no venomous toads, no demon overlords, and no expectations. I could go back to my quiet, solitary life. I could eat my takeout and watch my shows, and I would never have to do a push-up ever again. But as I stared at my empty living room, I realized something terrifying. It looked incredibly, suffocatingly lonely. I turned back to Lord Shen. The terrifying patriarch of the Heavenly Cloud Sect looked like he was preparing to walk to his own execution. I let out a long sigh. "You know, those noodles are definitely cold by now." Shen blinked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What?" I lifted my left foot and kicked my fuzzy pink pig slipper off. It sailed through the air, right through the blue mist, and landed on my living room rug. I lifted my right foot and kicked the second slipper after it. And honestly, I added, stepping away from the crackling vortex and walking barefoot across the cool, white jade toward Shin. I think my Netflix subscription expired yesterday anyway. Shin's eyes widened in absolute shock as the crackling blue portal, sensing the rejection, began to shrink. With a final, weak pop, the interdimensional rift vanished completely, leaving the courtyard silent and empty. Shin breathed, staring at the empty space where the portal had been, and then down at my bare feet. You cast away your demonic blood swine. You closed the rift. I made a choice, I corrected him, stopping right in front of him. I reached up and gently placed my hands on his chest, right over his racing heart. Sweatpants and Takeout are great, but they don't look at me the way you do. And they definitely don't rescue me from goth demon cults. Shin let out a shaky breath that sounded like a laugh. His large hands came up, framing my face with a desperate, reverent gentleness. You will have no modern conveniences here, he warned me, though he was leaning in closer with every word. I am a rigid, overly serious man who does not understand weekends. I know, I murmured, rising onto my tiptoes. You're a complete mess. But you're my mess. Shin didn't need any more convincing. He closed the remaining distance, and finally, after poison tea parties, flying granola bars, and interdimensional kidnappings, his lips met mine. It was better than any delivery food, better than any television finale, and entirely worth staying in this weird, wonderful martial world. Epilogue. It has been 3 years since I officially traded my Wi-Fi password for a husband who can literally sever a mountain in half with a flick of his wrist. Life in the heavenly cloud sect is still wildly dramatic, heavily armed, and entirely too reliant on dramatic monologues, but I've managed to make a few critical modern improvements. For starters, I successfully introduced the martial world to the concept of the weekend. It took about 6 months of intense, union-style negotiations with the sect elders, who initially thought I was pitching a demonic laziness curse, but now the disciples get Saturdays and Sundays completely off. Morale is at an all-time high, the dark circles under everyone's eyes have vanished, and sword-related accidents are down by 70%. As for my own martial arts journey, I never did learn how to do a proper push-up. After my third attempt resulted in a pulled hamstring, and me taking a 2-hour nap on the jade floor, the elders formally gave up. Instead, they officially categorized the couch patatu as a legendary, passive cultivation technique that relies entirely on horizontal energy conservation. My disciples bring me pillows. I tell them to hydrate. It's a flawless system. But my greatest achievement, by far, was the culinary revolution. After weeks of trial and error, 3 minor kitchen explosions, and a lot of confused chefs, I successfully invented a non-magical recipe for extra spicy garlic noodles. Currently, I was sitting on the veranda of our private pavilion, slurping down a bowl of those exact noodles. I was wearing my favorite pair of sweatpants. Technically, they were spun from the finest 1,000-year-old celestial silk and embroidered with silver lotuses by the imperial tailors, but they still had an elastic waistband, and that was all that mattered to me. Footsteps approached, completely silent, but I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The scent of sandalwood and rain drifted over the veranda. Lord Shen sat down beside me on the plush silk cushions. He was still the most fearsome, lethal warrior in the realm, draped in midnight blue robes, his obsidian eyes sharp and observant. However, his terrifying reputation had been ever so slightly softened by the small, embroidered pouch he now carried on his belt at all times. Did you bring the contingency snacks? I asked around a mouthful of noodles. Shen's lips quirked into a devastatingly handsome smile. He reached into his pouch and produced a small, perfectly wrapped bundle of roasted almonds and sweet dried plums. I would never march into the afternoon without adequate provisions for my wife's blood sugar. I am a tactical master after all. I swallowed, beaming at him. You're the best. He leaned over, entirely unbothered by the fact that I probably smelled like roasted garlic, and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead. His large hand reached out, gently wiping a tiny smudge of chili oil from the corner of my mouth with his thumb. You are radiant today, Grandmaster, he murmured, his eyes full of that same awe and adoration he had looked at me with since the day I threw a granola bar at an assassin. I leaned my head against his broad shoulder, watching the cherry blossoms drift through the courtyard. I didn't have my television, and I definitely couldn't order a pizza at 2 in the morning anymore. But as Shin wrapped his arm around me, pulling me securely against his side, I realized I didn't miss my old world at all. That's where this love story ends for now. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more romantic twists. Tell me in the comments what will you have done. Until the next story, keep craving romance.